So what else is out there? So far we've talked about a bunch of stuff, but let's talk about two of the big things that we often forget to play and practice to get real good mobility and fluid movement in our left hand or our fretting hand. We're going to stay with the same stuff we've been looking at because it's easy to apply it to things we've already been working on. So the A major scale, right? So 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 6, 7, 9, 6, 7, 9, 7, 9, 10, 7, 9, 10. I want you to know that you can start to use hammer-ons and pull-offs to strengthen your fretting hand. And it's one of the ways the pros do it all the time. We're going to focus primarily on hammer-ons right now. All that means, if you're unfamiliar, is that we're picking once, and then we're actually doing this, where we're hammering on the next notes. So in this entire exercise, I only want you to pick the first note of each string. And then I want you to hammer on or start to hit those next frets. And this is something that I think a lot of us struggle with at first because we think it should be pretty relatively simple. And it becomes easy over time. Don't worry about that. But really at first, you kind of got to give it a good hit to have it ring out. The main goal of a hammer-on is to sound just as loud as when you picked the note. So let me show you what I mean if we're just focused on this low E string. So you can see that it's relatively close in sound as far as the volume of each of them to that first one I picked. And I only picked the first one, the 5th fret. So again, we're working with the A major scale. It's 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 6, 7, 9, 6, 7, 9, 7, 9, 10, 7, 9, 10. What I want you to do to really get this mobility in your fretting hand is to start on each of those and pick the first note. Don't pick the remaining 2 on each string. And you're just going to hammer on all the way up the scale. So let me show you what that looks like for us to do. It seems pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It is something that will potentially tire out your hand. And I think there's one big disclaimer I need to say here. There's a big difference between exhaustion in your hand and pain in your hand. If at any point during this you feel pain, you stop, because we can really hurt ourselves. Exhaustion is to be expected. It's something we have to break through, but we have to make sure that we're not in pain and we're not doing damage. So really make sure you're aware of that going through here. But what this allows us to do is to start to give more strength to each of the fingers, the independent fingers that we're using here to play through this. And that's really valuable when you start doing improv and solos, let alone playing for long periods of time with a band in improv, something. It takes a lot of dexterity, but also endurance and ability to actually sustain that endurance. And we do that through exercises where we focus on not giving the benefit of using a pick. So again, just hammering on each of those notes. And you can start to combine these in different ways, going between 2 strings, adding a 3rd string. And before you know it, you have some really cool sounding exercises that you've developed. So there are just some really cool things you can do if you focus on just those hammer-ons and pull-offs in the process. And we're going to talk about pull-offs here in a bit, but I really just want you to focus on this. So how would we practice this? I always recommend using a metronome. I always recommend that. And I would recommend doing this in triplets. The way you could tell a musician versus a non-musician is most of us say triplets because that's how we count it, right? So triplet, triplet. There are 3 notes per click, right? So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And from there, I would just take a measure of a breather. So I would just ascend just like this, take a breather for a measure, go back, do it again. So this is exactly what it should sound like when you sit down to practice this and go through the process. Let alone you could start to come backward with hammer-ons. So there are a lot of different variations, and it's really up to you to interpret, but at the very least, I highly recommend that you go through just ascending, giving yourself a slight break, and then coming back. And doing that something like 10 times, clean and even, before you even start to change it or make any differences in there. But really, really incredible when it comes to building that strength, the independence, and the dexterity that's needed to actually play through this and go through this the right way.